like love your students thing for secondary looks a lot different. It's gonna look more like when you confide in them that you have a fear of clowns, and so the whole class takes out their phones, which they're allowed to have, and pulls up pictures of Pennywise for when you're passing out their final test. That's the clown from It, in case you didn't know. That's the way that high schoolers will tell you, hey, we think you're cool, like we appreciate what you're doing. For me, that was miserable and terrifying and a scarring experience. But it's gonna look more like things like that, and it's gonna be, the way I contextualized it for myself one day was I thought back on how big of a jerk I was to my parents in high school. And by that I mean just really unappreciative, like they drive you places when you don't have your license, like they're literally feeding you like 17 meals a day because you're unstoppable, and like you don't pause to say thank you. So when your students don't pause to say thank you, like don't hold them to the standards of college students, where we're like very polite and we hold the doors and we say thank you to our professors and like, right, nice. They're not gonna do that. They are literally 13, 14, 15 years old, and they're not gonna think that way. So you're gonna come out every day potentially feeling really, really exhausted and unappreciated. I know I did, particularly right in the middle. You don't have time, you have to say no to social plans, you have to go to bed at like 10 or 11. You just, because you're responsible for these people, you are responsible for the minds of young people, and that's your priority. And they might not appreciate that. I know, I teach English, like I'll be frank, kids hate it. Like you make them read A Rose for Emily and they're not gonna think William Faulkner is a genius, they're gonna be like, this lady's creepy and this story sucks. And it's your job to like push through that, having something you love dragged through the mud by teenagers, and tell them that it's worth their time, and convince them of it, not just tell them, but convince them. And so that is an incredibly exhausting experience, but at the end of the day, like, it's what you're on board for. This is your career, so find a way to find joy in it, because it's definitely there, but you're gonna have to contextualize it for yourself and find the reason, real reason that you want to bother with it. Because you're here in the room now, so you have to have it somewhere, but you're really gonna have to like set it in stone and get really confident in it. So make that the cornerstone of your senior year instead of like shots or hashtag senior shameless, because that won't be it.
Another thing with high schoolers that I learned was that sometimes they're just really mean just because they can see that it gets under your skin. And as soon as you show them that it's bothering you, that it becomes a game to them. So you need to not let them see that and just be really nice to them no matter what they say to do. Because then it stops being a game to them. Another thing for me has been huge is get enough sleep. It's been the most exhausting year of my life, but at the end it's been really rewarding. But you are going to have to go to bed at 8 o'clock some nights. Maybe that's just me. But because you can't stay up till 2 and then wake up at 6 and then have enough energy for the whole day. So that's the most important thing for me.
I suppose we're supposed to offer advice, so I guess my big piece of advice, instead of my little like preachy jokey thing, would be to build a great relationship with your cooperating teacher. I was really lucky. Mine was like an inverted personality of me, except for the fact that we're both hyper nerds. But she's like very authoritarian. And she like, her priority, number one priority in the classroom was establish control, establish herself as like the person. And my priority was always like empathetic, like let's get to know you as kids, like, and in that way we were polar different, but we were able to bond over other things. I got to know her as a human being, and so then when I asked her, like, I want to do something different with the classroom, I really want to like flex my teacher muscles or whatever, she was willing to like give me that ground and let me do that, which meant it was a lot more rewarding experience for me to be able to actually test my own mettle as a teacher instead of just emulating her. So if your teacher's awesome and you want to emulate him or her, do it. But if your teacher is not doing things the way you want to and you really want to try something new, have that relationship where you can respectfully ask them. Like, because they're going to be beside your university supervisor, your number one liaison, person you interact with, person you spend 7 hours a day with them at minimum. Like, that's a huge chunk of time. Your students won't be in there that long. Nobody else will be in there that long except for you and them. So if you have that working relationship, that will pay dividends for you students, so you can find a way to make it work to get along with your cooperating teacher, even if you think you can't. That's my advice right here.
Sorry, I just want to add one more thing about what Dr. Henderson said. This, goes both ways. I am speaking more for elementary, but about not being the kids' friends. That was one of the main things I was kind of worried about was going in because, I'm a very, want to be on their level and hug and love and, we just say, everyone loves me. But it's really important to establish yourself. I mean, yes, use your own strengths, your personality. I am a very, I like to, if they want it, but, hug my kids. My kids like to hug me and, hear about their day, but then also establish myself as, an authority figure. So, it took a while, but, I had to not be afraid to tell a kid to go move his clip or, something like that and start that off right off the bat. And thankfully, my cooperating teacher, I told her that was one of the things I was nervous about was, management. And, right off the bat, she just would, talk me through it. And thankfully, we had the same personality, so she, also hated doing that, which kind of helped because she could just say, well, here's how we do it. And then our management system worked really well. But, also go on, be open with the cooperating teacher. If there's stuff like that, that you're just like, this isn't my strong point, but, now I still hate it, but I'm not afraid to be like, you go move your clip, or you're sitting right up next to me the rest of the day, or something like that. But then also going back to being, friends with your students, early experience, and then, or the fall, when you're not full-time teaching, is the perfect time to get to know your students. And, so that was one of my main goals, is I want to know my students inside the classroom, but outside the classroom. Like, I wish I could have gone to more, but, 2 of my kids' sporting activities, because they asked me to. Me and my cooperating teacher went, and, my kids like to tell me about their weekends, but at appropriate times. But, when they would tell me about their weekends, I could see what they like to do, or, one of my kids going through divorce, and it was really affecting her, and she didn't say it, but I could just gauge it from her stuff. So I think when you have that time when you're not up in front of the classroom, it's really easy just to sit back and watch and kind of be disengaged sometimes, but don't let yourself, because this is a very valuable time for you to watch how your teacher does stuff, watch how your students interact when the teacher's not looking, so if you see that every time the teacher turns around, you have this one kid who does something, you know this for when you get out there and you feel like, hey, no, so little things like that. But just the fall is a very valuable time, and then when you get to the spring, and you have that classroom for 3 weeks or 4 weeks by yourself, I promise it won't feel as overwhelming as it feels right now, and you really will